Hi everyone, it's Raina. So I have been doing a series on the astrology of addiction, and this is the third and final video on that subject. And I'm going to be covering the different elements and what they may be attracted to in terms of mind-altering substances. And I just want to make it clear that obviously any sign, any element can abuse any kind of substance. And, there's more types of addiction than just alcohol, pot, pills, opiates, coke, whatever, and speed and those kinds of things. Well, those would be pills, but you know what I mean. There's so many different types of substance abuse, but there's other types of addictions. And I've been kind of like just sticking with substance abuse because I feel like those other things, it's a little bit less clear cut. If somebody is addicted to the internet, they're not going to have physical withdrawal, perhaps. They're not, you know what I mean? Or whereas if somebody's addicted to something like opiates or even something like Xanax, they might be in danger if they try to go through withdrawal on their own. I mean, people have done it, but I'm just saying that physical addiction to something can be very serious. So, and life-threatening. So that's why it's not the same thing. So the other thing that I want to say is that I am not trained in any type of, I don't have any medical training, training in mental health or anything. These videos are meant to be kind of like entertaining, looking at your own sign and seeing if there's any truth to what I'm saying. It's just one of those kinds of things. Because we can talk about so many things as it pertains to our sun signs and other influences that we have. And sometimes they may hit the mark, sometimes they may not be exactly correct, but they're always fun to think about. So I'm also going to be talking about the certain angles or aspects that may indicate a tendency to overdo it, substance abuse wise. So I kind of like was shying away from the word addiction because sometimes people, they may binge drink and then they might not do it for another month, but when they do it, it could be very risky because they could get really inebriated. And so you can't just say, oh, well, that's not a problem because they're not doing it 3 times a week or every day. No, I mean, if somebody gets out of control in whatever behavior they're engaged in, that kind of thing could lead to dire consequences. So I don't want to really emphasize the habitual nature of it. So let's start with the fire element because Aries is the first sign of the zodiac and it's a fire sign. So the 3 fire signs are Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. And even though they have their own, unique qualities, they have certain things in common. Fire signs are individuals or individualistic, so they really pride themselves on kind of being their own person. Thinking for themselves, being independent. There's a love of freedom, even a rebellious quality, and they may have a lot of energy. They have a lot of ambition, typically. Of course, this is not going to be true across the board. There's so many factors that can kind of mute some of those things, make them a little bit less prominent. And, but anyway, when people are attracted to certain drugs, and I am going to, when I say drugs, I'm also including alcohol, by the way, mind-altering substances, there's a reason for that. And with fire signs, they can be interested in something that helps them to maintain a high level of energy. So stimulants, and those can run the gamut. You have some people that, um, like cocaine. Some people do crack. Some people are into meth, speed. And by the way, those drugs that are prescribed legally, and whatever you want to think of that, can be used for recreational purposes. I'm speaking specifically of Ritalin and Adderall. And there used to be, the Rolling Stones have a song called Mother's Little Helper, and I think that was supposed to be amphetamines in the, maybe like the 1950s in particular, going into the 60s when the Stones began to write their songs. There was, the reason for that is because the pharmaceutical industry, there were drugs that were created to suppress appetite for weight. I mean, these drugs have been around for a long time. Judy Garland, she was in the 30s in the early 40s after she did, she'd been taking those even before, though, to keep awake. When her mother, her family of origin gave her drugs before she was in Wizard of Oz. So, but then the film industry did to keep her weight down. So these drugs have been around for a very long time. And then, of course, some people get overstimulated, so then they're taking other things. But the fire signs really want that kind of up feeling. That's because they already have it, so it's enhancing that. Or if they don't feel that they have it, and that is something that they value, then that is what they will gravitate towards. In terms of water signs are Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, and water signs are going through life through the lens of emotion. And this is going to be subjective types of emotion. The fire signs are emotional too, but they are more passionate. And the water signs are very sensitive. So they can, emote, which means that they can convey emotions to other people. And that can be very helpful to comfort people. Not everybody has that ability. I mean, a person can say, "Oh, I hope you feel better," but their words are almost dry. But if you've ever been comforted by a water sign, who is balanced and is really, who has water as maybe a predominant element for their personal points, because some water signs, they may just have their sun in a water sign and they have a lot of fire, for instance, and the fire is going to overpower that water. But if they have it to that degree, you really feel comforted, soothed by such a person because they really care. Sometimes we feel like other people, they say the words, but they don't really care. Well, water signs really care. But on the flip side of that, they care about themselves. And it can be very difficult sometimes to navigate life on life's terms when sometimes the world seems very cruel, when it seems very cold, when people don't seem to care. You will find, if you deal with a water sign, that if you say something, if they're going through something and you're kind of trying to get beyond it and you're not giving them enough sympathy or understanding, they may really take offense to that and think that you are being insensitive and whatever. So there's like a very tender core to these people that makes it so that they feel like maybe sometimes that they're constantly under attack, whether it's from another person or from some event that is happening either in the world at large or in their own personal orbit. And by the way, because they are natural empaths, they can feel that pain of other people, and that can feel painful to them. So they tend to gravitate towards depressants. So that would be alcohol, that would be tranquilizers like Xanax, Valium. And of course, there are the opiates like heroin, opium itself, fentanyl, which is a very, very potent type of opiate, Oxycontin, and also barbiturates for sleeping pills. So that's another thing too, that people abuse these kinds of drugs. And you know, just like it's very interesting. It's almost like you could say it's karmic, because one thing with the speed types of drugs that I just talked about with the fire signs, those can be depleting. I mean, even caffeine, which we would, like coffee and tea, we would call those soft addictions. I think that's the name for them, where they're things that, you can get physically addicted to, but you can also wean off of, and you're not going to have much of it's not dangerous to wean off of it. And it isn't really that hard. It may be hard in the short term, but you can do it. And those, even something like that, like coffee, you can really deplete your adrenals. And so it's like it has the opposite effect. It makes you more tired. The same thing applies to depressants. Well, I mean, the title should tell you something about when they're called depressants, but people are taking them to numb their pain. Now, some people will say drinking away their drinking away their sorrows or drowning their sorrows or whatever, but it doesn't erase your sorrows, and it actually depresses you, so the person becomes more depressed. So these are vicious cycles or circles when you take drugs to try to solve problems, because it doesn't heal people of problems. It masks it, but it doesn't even mask it very long. You actually get the opposite effect. So this is one of the reasons why, diving deep into what is going on is ultimately how the person can get healed from whatever it is that is bothering them. When it comes to air signs are the intellect. So I feel like air signs are interested in anything that gives them a different perspective in life. So, I was thinking too, like the air signs love religious paths. There's like a path in yoga called jnana. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but it's Jnana, and that's the path of the intellect. There's different types of yogic paths because there are different types of people. And some people are very much in their mind and their intellect, and they need to understand God. So anything that makes them think from a different angle. So marijuana, this is one of the reasons why marijuana was used in a certain era. I would say even in the 50s, the beatnik generation, but into the 60s, because they were into jazz and they were into these things that kind of were abstract. And so that was helping them. But even, psychedelics that are more powerful can also be attractive to such people because they break through the brick wall of the intellect. Some people think that their minds are going to be their savior, but sometimes they can be one of the biggest gatekeepers of the matrix because they're concepts. And so what happens is that the person takes one of those psychedelics and it everything seems to be turned upside down, and it doesn't even it may seem illogical, like things are not what they seem, but that in itself allows people to understand that you know what they thought was reality is an illusion, that there's no real ultimate reality, that there are different levels. And so that can be very intriguing. And by the way, people say, well, you can't be addicted to mushrooms or acid or anything like that, or even marijuana. I would say marijuana, I think you can. The thing about marijuana, and I realized this, and talking about addiction in general, because I know someone that has physical withdrawals, and I think that because marijuana stays in the system for a couple of months, the active ingredient THC, I think that even if a person is using it constantly, it will gradually leave their body. Maybe there are some people who metabolize it much quicker, and those are the people that have more of a physical addiction. But in general, it doesn't. When you think about something like caffeine or heroin, even heroin and alcohol, people get DTs, delirium tremors. The reason is because it leaves the body so quickly that it creates a very dramatic detox. And so actually the things that don't stay in your body, they may, give like a very dramatic detox, and it makes a person think that they can't get off of it because the detox is too intense. But anyway, I don't know if that's true. I just felt like that might be a possible theory on that. But anyway, with the earth signs, it was funny because I was going to say the earth signs probably like things of the earth. So they might like weed, whatever you want to call it, pot, shrooms, peyote, things like that, because they are people who identify with things that are natural, that are plants, plant medicine even. But that's not an addiction. I shouldn't even bring that up. But what I'm saying is they might resonate with these things primarily or specifically because they are coming from the earth, but also because things like pot can take them out of that linear 3D world where they are very comfortable. And people who are earth signs or who have a lot of earth, they tend to find it very easy to live in the world because what the world represents is something that they're naturally wired to appreciate. So the five senses, the sensual qualities of life, the monetary system, the idea of a schedule, like everything has a timeline. People who are air signs, they're kind of above it all. So they're kind of ethereal. They're not really grounded. There's a very grounded quality with the earth element. So anything that is a product of the earth may be something that attracts them, but then also to break free from the 3D matrix, that may be very that can be particularly important. I don't want to use a word like important because that implies that, oh, they should do it, and I never in these videos tell people. I don't want to be flippant about any substances because you have to really be intentional and aware before you do these things, because not everybody's going to react the same way. So I'm not being casual about this whatsoever. But people who do it, they may find that it breaks through their 3D mental construct. And so it's so dramatically different than how they experience the world on a day-to-day basis that they can feel like they really have made a shift. So, yeah, and like I said, this is just for fun because we know that just by looking at movie stars, rock stars, if you know their signs and you know what kind of drugs that they've dabbled in, you can see that what I'm saying is not the gospel truth at all. And some people will take anything they can get their hands on, let's face it. They're not going to just stick to one type of drug. As a matter of fact, if somebody gets into coke, they're probably going to get into heroin or alcohol because they have to come down and they're just, they can't go to sleep. So, or pills or whatever. So it's just looking at it from that kind of point of view. And then looking at aspects, what I would say primarily, you could say a lot of things. I could talk about the moon in hard angle to, for instance, Saturn, and the person feels like they have been oppressed and they have to, or even Pluto, and they're trying to break free from that. What I want to focus on is Neptune, because Neptune is the ruler of Pisces, and Neptune rules drugs and illusion and escapism and transcendence, all those things. And some of those things are hunky-dory and some of them are not so much. So, hard angles from the sun to Neptune, I would say, the squares and oppositions are the hard angles. Well, I was trying to think if conjunctions from the sun to Neptune are good, bad, or indifferent. And I think, it can be more on the positive side. It kind of gives you that flavor of the sun in Pisces. But of course, you have to look at what the actual conjunction is in, what sign it's in. If it's in Aries, it's going to be a lot less, dreamy, warm, and fuzzy. It's going to be, that Aries energy is very passionate, but very volatile. And so, you're making contact. The sun is making contact with Neptune, and it changes the sun, but it can't change it significantly when it's in this warrior energy that it would if the conjunction is in Cancer. But if the conjunction is in Capricorn and the person has it here, a conjunction between the sun and Neptune can render the person lacking identity. And this doesn't mean that the person can't develop one. None of these angles, none of these house placements is like this curse or this thing that you just have to deal with. It's showing the patterns and what you have, what you have to work on. And with that conjunction, the person has to find out who they are. But, this is kind of tricky in cultivating identity, because you have to always know that that's just for this lifetime. First of all, your natal chart is just for this lifetime, but also, what is the true self? Is the true self the person who is in this lifetime a lawyer or a doctor, and they have this profession that other people are really impressed by, or they are a movie star, something like that. If that person gets attached to that identity and something happens, which it inevitably will if they live long enough, where they no longer have that same kind of stardom or that same, either they're forced to retire or they have to retire, they want to retire because it's very stressful, or they just are tired of doing what they're doing, but they still have become attached to this aspect of themselves, and they really define themselves through what they do, because the sun can be that, what you're doing. But with Neptune, it throws a haze on it. And if your conjunction of the sun to Neptune is in Pisces, you might be like, who cares? I don't care what I am. I don't care if I don't have an identity. But if it's in a sign like Capricorn, which is very ambitious and rules the 10th house of career, then it can be kind of like feeling, you might feel disoriented. You might feel as though you don't have solid ground to walk upon. And you might even feel like a failure because you can't define yourself easily. And I've read it said that other people may find you a bit sketched out because you kind of have this slippery quality, kind of like that Piscean fish quality of not being able to be perceived in a certain way. Like there's not that sense of definition. There's a quality of dissolving that is connected to Neptune that can be present in your basic personality. So the bottom line of why I'm even bringing that up is because I'm saying that people can feel badly about themselves, and that can lead them to either take something to make themselves feel confident, like they can conquer the world, and if they're not in that place that they want to be, they still feel like, hey, they're still like that cocky kind of like, I'm really okay type of thing. Or they can drown their sorrows because they don't feel like they measure up. But so that's the sun. I'm not really going to talk much about that because I don't know if that's a bit of a stretch, but I do think that people sometimes get like that. With the moon squaring or opposing Neptune, this is, and I'll bring in Mercury because this can apply for that as well. The person can find themselves easily disappointed in life because they build things up. Neptune can be that idealization. Is that, yeah, I think that's a word. But this can lead the person to over idealize things, and that's a form of escapism, because when you go through life and you're always looking for the next thing that's going to knock your socks off, that's going to change your life and take you to the next level, you're always relying on an external thing to do that, and that in itself is an illusion because life can't do that for you. There's always going to be that high, or even, with love. A person may be in love with love, and it's like they go from one relationship to the other. When the relationship becomes more pedestrian or, mundane, that's when the person starts to get disillusioned. And that's part of Neptune too. You got the illusion and the disillusionment. And then the person starts to feel like, oh, I'm not in love with this person anymore because I don't have that high anymore. See, love can be a high, that infatuation phase. So then the person, what do? They find somebody else that they can, and it's really like projecting that fantasy on that other person. And I'll bring Venus into this mix as well, because if somebody has a hard angle from Venus to Neptune, either the square or the opposition, they can project. The opposition in particular can be projecting onto another person that kind of idealized version of life, or relationships, I should say specifically. But of course, when somebody needs to project something, it means that they're not really in touch with reality. It's kind of like living in their own world, in their fantasy world, and trying to make something in the outer world conform to their fantasy. So you will see with people who have squares or oppositions from the moon or Mercury to Neptune, that they choose, like with Mercury, they can think about things in their own. They can create false narratives that make whatever it is that they're dealing with seem okay. They can tell themselves things that are simply untrue to kind of comfort themselves. And this is something that I think more times than not comes from childhood, when they have dealt with parents, and it's a coping mechanism so that the person doesn't get depressed or anxious about dealing with that situation. It's kind of like it's a form of escapism, and it's tuning out to what is going on and kind of living in that la la land. And so, as will happen eventually, the person will either get tired of something, or let's say they have like been anticipating, I can't wait, I'm going to this. Could be something as minor as, a movie that they've wanted to see, or a concert. And they build it up and build it up, and then it's not as great, or it's over with, it's a temporary experience, and they have to go back to the real world. But that can be very painful for these types of people, because they already are very, they tend to gravitate towards things that are fantasy, escapism. So that constant disillusionment of something being temporary, or something not measuring up to what they thought it was going to be, these kinds of constant disappointments can make a person feel a bit jaded, and that can cause them to be attracted to substance abuse, because they can stay in that artificial mood for a longer period of time. And yet even that doesn't necessarily work forever. You still have to come down from your high, so it's one of those things where everything that I'm talking about, when people cultivate a spiritual practice like meditation and studying spiritual concepts, they will that is the kind of thing that helps us navigate through the difficult times in life. The times when you do feel like you're losing faith, the times when you do feel like things are too intense, you have anxiety, all these things can be helped. But there's no spiritual bypassing either. Sometimes you have to really feel those, that visceral pain in order to transcend it. People, we have been taught that we do whatever it takes to avoid pain. And that is a form of resistance when you think about it. So the other angle that I wanted to mention is Mars in a hard angle to Neptune. All of these things that I've mentioned are personal planets, and that's why they can really affect a person on a day-to-day level, at a deep level. And the hard angles from Mars to Neptune can indicate that kind of gravitation towards that. Mars can be a drive that the person has. And one way that this I told you I wasn't going to talk about anything other than substance abuse, but Mars can be the sex drive. And when people have a hard angle between Mars and Neptune, they can become addicted to pornography. They can become addicted to finding the perfect sex partner. And because again, yes, it can be about pleasure, but it can also be about transcendence. It's also about this thing that's just going to completely, and they may even like mix in love with it. Like, this is my ultimate partner, but they're really based on the physical act rather than the emotional coming through. And so that can wreak havoc on relationships because the person may be prone to affairs. Again, that's not going to be true for everybody. But, a person that has this hard angle from either the square of the opposition from Mars to Neptune really has to think about why they do what they do in general, because they might be doing something and they're operating under delusion. There's some kind of an illusion that they are marching towards, that they're hoping is going to become a reality if they merge with it. And so that can indicate a proclivity to use intoxicants as a way to achieve that kind of oblivion, sometimes maybe thinking that they're entering this altered state of consciousness. Maybe they think that it's a spiritual thing. And that's why, one of the things with psychedelics, there are people, and I assume they still exist. I've seen photographs of them. Mexican, I guess they would call them like practicers of shamanism or some kind of earth religion called peyoteras. And they do take peyote as part of their religion. And I think they do it. They have a pilgrimage, and I think they do it once a year or something like that. But they're not just doing it to party. They're not, that's not what it's for. But yet we have people who do these kinds of psychedelics to have a good time. And they're not really, they're not doing it as part of some kind of ritual or ceremony. And I'm not saying that that's evil that they're doing like that, but that can be a form of abuse because they're just doing it willy-nilly. And if a person is driven to do these things, there may be downsides to that, even if they're not like doing it every day. Maybe they're not even doing it once a week, but some people probably do it very often. And that maybe it has a way of making them ungrounded. There are downsides to everything. So anyway, yeah, it's very interesting. I could talk about other things. I'm not going to, but just the bottom line is, I just want people to be more thoughtful about what they're doing and why they're doing it. It's not about making it some kind of moralistic thing, but I do feel that our society is more geared towards telling people like this is the norm, which it probably is. I mean, the percentage of people who drink, and especially on the weekend, I'm sure is very high. And it can feel very strange to step away from that, but you can if you want to. And certainly, you don't have to have fun. You don't have to alter your mind to have fun or to find transcendence. It's very important to note that. And thanks for listening. And if you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.